So today I'm going to be talking about brand, and this is a topic and a term that people are talking a lot more about nowadays in B2B SaaS. So we're going to look at how you can unleash your superpower and build a killer brand in B2B SaaS. So to do that, we're going to break this talk down into 3 parts. So firstly, look at why. Why is brand so critical? Why is it so important? And then secondly, look at how. How do you actually go about building a killer brand? And we're going to look at some examples of companies who are building great brands today and introduce a 4-step framework that you can use and apply to your own business as well. So that's the bulk of the talk. And then just want to leave with a short question in the third part for you to go away and think about after this talk. So just briefly about myself and who I am. So Edward Ford, Marketing Strategist at Advance B2B. We are a SaaS marketing agency based up in the cold north in Helsinki, Finland. I'm originally from the UK, so I don't have the most Finnish name, that's why. My title is Marketing Strategist, but it doesn't quite tell the picture because I like to get my hands dirty, build stuff, break stuff in Hubspot, create content, play with chatbots and all that. And I'm starting to lose my voice after 3 days of SaaStock, but you might recognize me as host of the Growth Hub podcast all about B2B SaaS marketing. So if you've never heard of it, then I hope you're going to check it out afterwards as well. So let's get into it. Part 1, why? Why is brand so important? Why is everybody talking about brand these days? And in order to answer that question, I think we need to go back in time, 20, 25 years to the early days of SaaS. And I think this image illustrates quite nicely what the SaaS landscape looked like towards the late 90s. It was this barren wasteland, this desert, a lot of sand, some shrubs. There was one cloud, which is Salesforce. And if you look close enough, there's someone in the middle of that picture. It's basically Mark Benioff saying, where the heck is everybody else? This is going to explode. And fast forward to today and what the SaaS landscape looks like now. And I guess some of you probably know what slide is going to come next. It's so cliched, but it's Brinker's Beast. So Scott Brinker's famous Martech 5000 landscape. And there's so many companies competing in the SaaS space, so many competitors, there's so many companies doing the same thing. And remember, this is just the MarTech space. So the same thing is happening in different verticals, in healthcare, financial tech, and so forth and so forth. So many commodities, so much consolidation, that you need to find a way to stand out and differentiate yourself. Another nice quote that ties back nicely to brand was from Des Traynor, Chief Strategy Officer at Intercom at SaaStock London earlier this year. And he said, features will not protect you in a SaaS world. So you need to start thinking beyond just the product and what it does. It's sort of table stakes that you have a great product in SaaS. It's what you build on top of that, the experience that is going to really differentiate yourself. So this ties back nicely to brand. You need to be thinking beyond features, because they're not going to protect you. And the important thing to realize here is that the features themselves can be copied. The barrier for entry is so low, everyone can come and enter your space. Even if you don't have a technical background, you can find people to build great products. People can just copy what you're doing. And the important thing to remember, though, is that the feelings, the emotional connection that people have for your companies, for your brand, what it is you do, now that is super hard to replicate. And this comes back to brand, and that's why it's so important. So remember, your features, they can always be copied. And there could well be some competitors who do very similar things to what you do. But the feelings, the emotional connection, that's going to be totally different. That's so much harder to replicate. And this is why brand is so important. But there are skeptics. I think when I start talking about branding, some people are like, oh yeah, this is great, this is cool, I really want to talk more about branding. And other people are like, it's some kind of marketing fluff, right? We don't really need to worry about brand, we just need leads, just like fill the funnel, right? But Steli FD, super skeptical on brand. So he's a very opinionated chap, and he was saying like a few years ago, I was just translating that to BS basically, I didn't care about that. But then he realized that brand was one of the reasons that enabled Close.io to be so successful in such a crowded space. And I think the CRM space is a great example where you have so many competitors. The products are quite similar, they do the same job. Many, if you put them side by side, they even look very similar. You wouldn't necessarily be able to know which product belongs to which company. So brand is super important. So if Steli caught on to this, then I think we all need to catch up as well. So what's going to happen, and I think this is not just applicable to B2B SaaS, I think this is B2B in general, that we're going to start seeing a shift towards the B2C world where consumer behavior is heavily influenced by brand and preference. And I think marketing teams in B2B SaaS, they're going to start looking at what B2C marketers are doing. They're going to look at what has been working well in the B2C space and what can we take into our marketing playbook and our toolkit, and how can we rethink the way we approach marketing. So we're going to see this move towards the B2C world in B2B SaaS. So these are just some background drivers behind why brand is so important, but let's look, okay, how do we actually go about building a killer brand? And to answer that question, we go back to our dear friend Mark Benioff in the SaaS desert of 20 years ago, and there are so many lessons you can learn from Salesforce about how to build a successful SaaS business. And one of those important lessons is the importance of brand. So there are many reasons why Salesforce was super successful, but one of those is that they understood the importance of building a great brand from day one. And this was even before the situation we have today where there's intense amounts of competition. And if you've read Behind the Cloud, you'll know that this is one of the very first things Benioff starts talking about. Like, we have to build a great brand. We have to deliver on our brand promise. We must think brand. And they did a bunch of crazy stuff. And we'll dig into that now because this is how they did it. So the first thing Salesforce did back in the day is they identified this shift. They realized that software was going to be delivered through the internet and not on-premise as it was. This was a meta-level shift that was happening at that time, and they thought, okay, we're going to bet on this. This is the future. And they're one of the first companies to really jump into this space. But nobody had really done this before. So they had to educate the market, and they had to create a category. They call it cloud-based sales automation. I've seen several talks today, including the one we just saw now, that re-emphasizes the importance of category creation. So Salesforce did it. No one had heard of cloud-based sales automation. It still sounds like a lot of buzzwords, sales automation, but this was some time ago, and you could even argue that they really helped develop the SaaS category and brought SaaS to the fore as well. So that was the second step after they had identified this shift. Then once they started developing the category, they started reinforcing this theme of cloud. So no one knew what the cloud was 20 years ago, and they were one of the companies that really brought it to the forefront. So they started talking about cloud. All their products are named after different clouds, marketing cloud, sales cloud, and so forth. Their logo is a cloud. Benioff's book, Behind the Cloud, it was all about reinforcing a theme of cloud. And then the fourth thing they did is that they started a movement. So they boldly declared that software is dead. This is the end of software as we know it. And they did a bunch of crazy stuff, a bunch of marketing campaigns. They hijacked a load of events. They set up their own events, which were totally different to all the dreary B2B events back in the late 90s. They got into trouble with the police. It's all there in Behind the Cloud. And this is what they did. They identified a shift, created a category, reinforced the theme, started a movement, and built their brand around this. And this is the framework, and you can see it starts off quite strategic. It's quite macro level strategic, and then as you work your way down, it gets more micro level, tactical, more marketing campaign driven. And what's quite interesting is when we look at this framework, and if we think about, okay, who are the best brands in B2B SaaS today, you notice that they all follow the exact pattern. They all follow these 4 steps. So let's take a look and see about a couple of other examples. So, Drift. I can't talk about building a great brand in B2B SaaS today without talking about Drift. So Drift is the new way businesses buy from businesses, and they're competing in the super competitive MarTech landscape that we saw on Brinker's Beast earlier. So Drift, they identified this shift. They were looking at how are marketing teams selling, how are sales teams selling today, and it was all about getting people to your website, filling out a form, a lead form, downloading a gated content piece, being enrolled in a 30-day drip campaign. You might move down the funnel, perhaps you become marketing qualified, someone will then reach out to you, or in some cases, maybe you download a PDF and then someone calls you up 5 minutes later before you've even opened the damn thing. And it wasn't the best buying experience. Typically, it took quite a long time as well. So for users and customers, it wasn't the best thing, and for marketing and sales teams, it was also quite slow. So they said, hey, we just need to break this down. We need to go back to our roots. We need to have conversations. Let's just discuss with people. Buying and selling shouldn't be that hard. It's like you go into a store and just chat with someone. So they thought, we need to do that. We need to rethink the marketing playbook. And the product is built around having conversations, chatting with people when you're on the site. So it's a much better buying experience. You can discuss with people. And for sales and marketing teams, it's much quicker as well. So they identified that there was this shift happening from traditional marketing to new marketing. They built a product around this, but marketing teams had never operated in this way before. We weren't programmed to think like this. So they had to create a category which they called conversational marketing. Nobody had heard of conversational marketing until Drift started talking about it about a year or so ago, maybe a year and a half ago. So these were the first 2 steps. Then they reinforced the theme. So at the heart of Drift is humans communicating with one another, and that means conversations. And Drift talked about conversations again and again and again. If you read their blog posts, if you read their content, it's all about conversations. It's all about replicating the experience of going into an Apple store when you buy their product. And that's the same thing that they want to give to their customers, to their customers. Their sales, their customer references and success stories are all about how they helped their customers increase the number of conversations they had. The fantastic Seeking Wisdom podcast is all about people just having conversations with one another. All their products, even if it's little Drift lead bot there, it's all about conversations and interactions. So they reinforce this theme of conversations. And then they started a movement. And it's very similar to what Salesforce did with No More Software. I actually think it's very interesting to read Behind the Cloud, then go and study Drift, and there's a huge overlap. I think they're highly influenced by Benioff and what they did. So the Drift team, they said no more forms. All right, we're getting rid of all forms in marketing. No more lead forms, no more gated content. They ungated all their content, and this was during 2016. And everyone in marketing was like, what? Are you crazy? How do you get leads? Like, how does this work? What are you guys doing? You're mad. And they shared their learnings. They started No Forms Month. They just did a bunch of crazy stuff, and they're still going strong with the No Forms movement today. So if we take a look at the 4 steps Drift, they identified this shift from the marketing funnel type of thinking that we were all focused on in B2B marketing, and they thought, we need to think about the customer journey. We need to put the customer at the heart and rethink what is the best way for them to buy and the best way for our sales team to sell. And as marketers, we need to bridge that gap between the two. They created the category of conversational marketing and reinforced the theme of conversations across everything that they did. And then they manifested that through the No Forms movement. Now, if we go back 10 years before Drift, let's take Hubspot. They did exactly the same thing. So they noticed back then, B2B marketing was all about interruptive outbound marketing. So telemarketing, cold calls, buying all these email lists and spamming 10,000 people in hope that maybe a couple of people would sign up for your product. And they thought there has to be a better way. So value-adding, helpful inbound marketing, help your customers be successful, they will come to you. And they created the category of inbound marketing. So nobody knew what inbound marketing was until Hubspot started preaching about it. I mean, there is some debate about did they actually come up with the concept of inbound marketing. It's based quite heavily on Seth Godin's book, Permission Marketing, but there is no denying that HubSpot became the definitive category leader within the inbound marketing space. So then they started reinforcing a theme, inbound. Everything was inbound. We all started hearing about inbound. They set up inbound.org, a community for B2B marketers. They have their inbound conference, which is not a HubSpot conference, it's an industry level conference for inbound marketers. We started hearing things like inbound sales and inbound recruitment. And that's because the movement that they wanted to start was to help the world go inbound. And they did a fantastic job of doing that. But what's quite interesting to look at HubSpot today and see, okay, well, how is the brand evolving? How is the brand developing as the company has grown so much? And it's quite interesting to take a look at HubSpot's website And you can't find any reference to inbound marketing anywhere on their homepage. I did a quick search and it's all the way towards the bottom. Now it's all about growth. It's all systems grow. It's the Hubspot growth stack as their product has evolved from marketing automation and inbound marketing to the free CRM and now the customer success and support hub set of products. So if we take a look at the framework and think, okay, well, how does this play out? They noticed the same shift that drifted. So it's no longer about just marketing and funnels and siloed marketing activities, but it's now about the whole customer journey. And HubSpot announced quite recently they have actually got rid of the funnel. They were one of the sort of champions of the funnel. They had a highly efficient marketing funnel up and running, and now they are all about the flywheel. In case some of you might have heard of it, some not, but if you haven't, go and check out. It's completely rethinking the approach to marketing. The theme now is no longer inbound, it's all growth. So growth, everything. And they've even updated their mission statement. It's no longer about helping the world go inbound, but now it's about helping millions of organizations grow better. But the challenge HubSpot has is that they did such a good job at educating everybody about inbound marketing and helping marketers be more successful that the perception we have of HubSpot is so heavily attached to inbound marketing and marketing automation that we don't necessarily know that they have a whole bunch of sales products, they have a whole bunch of customer support products, but they did such a good job building up that category that how are they going to overcome that challenge? In many ways, they're almost a victim of their own success, so it's going to be quite interesting to see how HubSpot takes on this challenge and what they actually do about it. But a question you might be thinking now, do I then need to build a new category if I'm going to build a killer brand? And basically the answer is no. You do not need to build an entirely new category. So we can take one more example from the world of marketing. So Terminus, based in Atlanta, and they also saw this same shift, that it's no longer about marketing funnels, but it's about the whole customer journey, putting the customer at the heart of everything that you do from a marketing perspective. And they're in the account-based marketing space. So that's been around for some time. It's nothing that Terminus came up with, but they reinforce this theme of customer centricity. And it's quite an interesting story. Sangram Vajre, co-founder, CMO, and now chief evangelist at Terminus, he was on a flight from San Francisco back to Atlanta. He'd actually been at Scott Brinker's MarTech conference. And he drew out the traditional marketing funnel, the classic V shape on a napkin. And he was looking at it thinking, oh, this has to be a better way. And then what he did, he turned the napkin upside down and he was like, yes, this is the eureka moment. We need to put the customer at the top and work backwards from there. So he flipped the funnel and completely rethought how we should approach the traditional marketing funnel that fits with the account-based marketing thinking. And they started this whole flip the funnel movement. They set up a conference which was, again, an industry-wide conference, nothing linked too closely to Terminus. They invited all their competitors to come along and said, hey, we need you guys to be here to build momentum into the category. As we all grow, then the category grows and we're all going to benefit. They have the Flip My Funnel podcast, daily podcast, which is fantastic, and they've got a bunch of resources at flipthefunnel.com. So a great example of how you can enter into an existing category and try to dominate that through the same framework. So here it is, the brand superpower framework. So identify a shift, create or own a category, reinforce a theme, start a movement. I'll leave it for a moment. A few people are taking pictures. This is like really good to tweet, by the way, this one. And at the top, it's more macro level strategic. So what's happening in your field? What's the big shift that you can ride and take advantage of? And then as you move further down, it gets more micro level, more tactical, more marketing campaign driven. And the brand is really spanning this entire process. So these are the 4 steps. So have a think about this and think, how does it apply to our business and what can we do around these 4 steps? So that's the superpower, and okay, how do you unleash it? What does this mean? And this is what we're going to focus on now at the end. And I think it's good to take a step back and ask, okay, well, what actually is brand? It's quite an abstract concept. I have asked a lot of people, how do they define brand? I think everybody has given a completely different answer. There doesn't really seem to be one definitive definition, but this one is probably the best that I have heard. So it's from Bill Macaitis, former CMO at Slack, first marketing hire, when I was chatting with him on our podcast, and he said that your brand is the sum of every single touch point a customer has with you during their journey. So from the first time someone hears about your company, all the way until today, that is the brand. That's the brand in their mind, people's minds. That's the perception. And I think it's an extremely good way to think about brand. And this is how we like to think about it at Advance B2B. So like I said, we're based in Finland, so you're going to get a quick Finnish lesson here. So brand is the punainen lanka of your customer journey. So 2 Finnish words. Punainen, that means red, because Finnish is totally crazy and it's just like unlike any other language you've ever learned. And lanka means thread, and basically it's a concept used in storytelling. So it's the central idea or the main theme that ties a story together. And I think it translates very nicely into the world of B2B branding, in that the brand is that red thread of the customer journey. It's the one thing that ties everything together. So the first contact that someone has with your brand, it basically plants a seed in their mind. Okay, this is the starting point. Does someone say something good about you? Do they say something bad? Do they say something, yeah, it was really effective for our team, or we paid a lot of money, we didn't get many results? Or perhaps they read an article online that someone had shared. Either way, that very first contact point. Then maybe they read about your product. Okay, what does the company do? Check out your blog, listen to your podcast, sign up for your newsletter. How do you write emails? How often do you send emails? Are you salesy? Are you spammy? Or are you helpful? Maybe they check out more about the product, look at the pricing, start a free trial. How's the onboarding? What's the user experience? Is it easy to discuss with the support team? Are the customer success team really helping me now that I've upgraded to paid and trying to get as much out of the product as possible? This is all brand. And so it spans the entire organization. It's not just a little thing that marketing needs to worry about. It's the whole organization. It helps shape the brand. So this is the external view. And internally, it connects the dots and builds a moat around everything you do. So brand is at the heart of everything you do. And I think everything should be informed by brand or come back to the brand strategy. So everything from your values, your vision, mission, culture, comes back to the brand in some way. So the same way that we saw Hubspot and their mission to help the world go inbound. Visual identity. I think a lot of people, when they think of brand, they think of visual identity. Like, that's the logos, the colors, the nice design of our blog. That's sort of the brand identity, the visual identity. It's part of it. It's super important, but it's just a piece of the puzzle. But the tone and voice, the way you write, your value proposition, the way you write copy, content that you put together, how you operate at events, the way you communicate, the way you sell, your product experience, how your customer support and success teams operate, it all comes back to brand. So the important thing here, externally, brand is all about perception. It's the perception people have of your company, of your brand. It's what they say when you're not in the room. And internally, it's just about influencing that perception through your actions. So externally, brand is all about perception. It lives in people's minds.